hashtag we're using on social media is CheckPoint. You can also send us a message. The number is 22155. To talk about the crisis in the health sector, joining me now is Governor James Ongwae, who's the governor for Kisii County, but also the chair of the Human Resources, Labour and Social Security Committee in the Council of Governors, and has been central in the negotiations we've seen over the last week or so with regards to the stalemate over the pay for nurses and doctors. Governor, thanks for joining us
thank you.
On CheckPoint. So let's start off with why it took so long for the county governments and the government to sort of kick in with the negotiations. The doctors and nurses gave a 21-day strike, and I think Kenyans only saw an effort on Sunday, the night before.
Thank you very much, Vion. And before I say anything, let me also send my condolences and those of the entire Kisii County to the families of the bereaved, and to those who are still in hospital. We wish them quick recovery. It is a tragic accident that happened. We hope that nothing like that happens again in this country. Going back to both the doctors and the nurses issues that you're talking about, it's not true that we've not been having dialogue with them. We've been having continuous dialogue. Indeed, just about 3 weeks ago, we had a meeting in Mombasa with the doctors, a lengthy meeting where we were discussing their issues, and we were discussing on the time frame that would have led to the finalization of the collective bargaining agreement as directed by the court, that we should finalize it by 5th of January. So we've had continuous discussions. As for the nurses, we have also been meeting with the nurses. I've met them on very many occasions. So it's not true that we have not been meeting. The only problem is that those meetings that happen in offices and are not advertised, you would not know that they're actually occurring.
But the talks have obviously not been successful, which is why we find ourselves at this point.
Yes, I would want to tell you that when the talks started, let's start with the doctors. We met with the doctors. We then set the precedent conditions for the negotiations. The government side was ready. The county governments, I was there, the governor of Kisumu was there, and the chair of the Council of Governors was also there. On the government side, you had the cabinet secretary and the principal secretary. And we also had other representatives from the cabinet office and even from the Ministry of Labour. And so the government, from our own side, we gave our offer. And we expect...
And what is that offer?
The offer for the doctors, it was 36,000 shillings for job group L, additional, and 42,000 shillings for job group M and above.
Okay. Why present this offer when the CBA itself was signed? Many are saying the first step is to implement that rather than starting to give counter offers.
If you remember, that CBA was signed in 2013 at a time when the county governments were already in operation, but it was signed by the Ministry of Health. Now, what then happened is that CBA was not registered with the Industrial Court. So the doctor,
and some say it's the refusal of the government and the Ministry of Health to do
be
so.
that as it may,
yeah.
The doctors went to court to seek the court dispensation that the CBA be signed and be operational.
Yeah.
But what happened is that if you look at that CBA, so the court anyway decided that the CBA itself was not a CBA. Because within the CBA itself, if you read it, Vion, it actually says that on the area of salaries, it is suspended until the salaries, the SRC gives guidance on what type of salaries should be there. So you can't sign a CBA that says that the salary part is suspended. That's what the CBA says, and I've got a copy. I would give you a copy of that. The court then said that to allow this CBA to be operational is to allow anality, because there is no salary in the CBA. The second issue that, again, the court said, and I'm now stating facts, because this matter is still in court. I don't want to deal with anything that the court had not said. The court said that this CBA does not touch county governments, because the county governments control about 80% of the staff. This CBA was
and that the CBA itself was signed with the Ministry of
with
Health.
the Ministry of
Who
Health.
was the employer at the time?
The Ministry of Health was not the employer at the time, but the Ministry of Health have their own staff. They're about 20% of
yes,
doctors.
I mean, but this CBA was between the Ministry of Health and the doctors.
It was
because this was done before health was devolved.
No, it was not done before devolution. It was signed when the county governments were in operation.
But it was signed before devolution took place
of
health.
I'm now,
because health devolution happened in 2014.
Health devolution happened together with the devolution function was given to us in 2010 when the new constitution came in.
However, did you not take over managing and handling doctors in 2014?
No, we took
after
over.
The CBA was
we
signed.
took over managing the doctors from the time that we assumed office beyond.
So you've been paying the salaries from 2013?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so you are then saying that you are party to this CBA?
What we are saying is that even before you sign a CBA, first the ministry signed a recognition agreement with the doctors before they signed the CBA.
But the county government has not.
The county governments don't have a recognition agreement.
Why not?
Those are some of the things that we were discussing, and we were ready to do it.
Okay, but it's from 2014 up until this point. What takes 2 years to sign a recognition agreement? You say you are ready to do it, but it's been 2 years coming. So how ready can you be for 2 years?
I am aware of that, but basically what I'm trying to tell you that there is a process that goes on. And I'm also trying to tell you that the doctors went to court, yeah, and they stopped the process which we were ready to actually go on with. As for the nurses, we didn't have a problem with the nurses because we started the negotiations, and those negotiations have been going on. In the negotiations, the team leader was the chairman himself of the nurses union. The deputy secretary general of the nurses union was there, and I think 7 other representatives, committee members, that were appointed by the governing council as negotiators with us. So we've been having those negotiations for the last more than 1 week, until today when you saw the document that was signed.
All right. We seem to be having an issue with when, health was devolved. In terms of when you took this over, because there's even the letter from the Transition Authority in the year 2014 that talked about the terms of doctors remaining the same as under Ministry of Health. But to be fair, Bwana Governor, you are not even in that CBA because at the point at which the negotiations began in 2011 and into 2012, you are not even registered in the CBA. It is between the Ministry of Health and the doctors. So many question why you are taking this on as your fight, because this is between the Ministry of Health and the doctors. And was this not interrogated at the point at which you took over health? Did you not speak to the government and say there's a CBA here that's not been implemented, and therefore what is the status of that before we take on this responsibility of the doctors and health in the counties?
You know, at that time, that would not have occurred because, first of all, that CBA, and I'm trying to explain this to you, was not actually registered. So it was signed. It wasn't a CBA.
But it was signed.
It was signed, but it was not registered. So in legal terms, it wasn't a CBA.
So you chose to disregard the whole idea that there was a CBA?
We did not choose to disregard that. If it had been signed and registered, it would have been incumbent upon us to actually pay whatever was needed.
But was the idea of the CBA thought about? Fine, it was signed, not registered with the courts.
Yes.
But was there a consideration that there was this elephant in the room, which was the CBA at the point you were taking this over?
And even if you wanted to implement it, Vion, that CBA did not have a salary structure, so you can't implement something in a vacuum.
Okay.
The CBA itself was saying, and I have a copy, and I've told you I'll give you a copy. It was saying, and they signed it knowing that it was saying so, that the salary part of this CBA remains suspended until the Salaries Review Commission, SRC, gives guidelines. That's what it says, and that's what they signed for.
So what is the sticky point with this conversation? Because 6 days now and the doctors remain on strike, and we'll get to the nurses issue in just a moment. So 6 days now, this is still going on, talking about the salary that wasn't there or was not. What is the county government prepared to give what are the compromises that you're prepared to give towards resolving this stalemate?
I think what I'm trying to say is that as a compromise, we gave that initial salary, we gave that initial amount of 36,042 for them to go back to work. And then we were saying that we were going to continue with the negotiations for the implementation of the CBA, which means that the CBA itself was also going to give additional resources if we had actually sat down on the table like we were asking them. And so, in a sense, what one would say is that once we gave them the offer, we expected them to come back and give us a counter offer. They didn't. They walked away, they have not come back. But we have asked that the doctors are part and parcel of us. We have asked that they come back, we sit, we negotiate over these things, because where there is no dialogue, you just can't get an answer.
All right.
So the problem is actually not on our part, the problem is on their part.
Okay, so no problem at all on the part of the county governments?
There is no problem on the part of the county governments, and I suspect there is no problem on the part of the national government. If they come back on the negotiation table, we'll negotiate.
All right, so let's talk about this return, the recognition agreement. It's been pending for 2 years. You say it is a process. Perhaps you could explain to us this process that takes 2 years, because the doctors feel like there is no show of faith if there is even no recognition agreement between the doctors and the county governments. In fact, the one with the nurses is going to be signed on Wednesday. But what is this process that takes 2 years and counting for the county governments to recognize the unions that represent doctors and nurses?
I think the issue for us here is that you are dealing with a doctors' union that has been having conversation with the Council of Governors, where I've been chairing a number of meetings. And we were advancing this and we were moving forward. And we had actually reached a stage where we were ready, not only, even before you start talking about the collective bargaining agreement, where we were going to finalize the recognition agreement with them. So perhaps history and the past is an issue, but we are now in the present. We now have this particular problem. And I want to tell you that we were ready. And we were about 3 governors who have been here for a whole week. We were ready to negotiate and finalize with the doctors only if they come back to the negotiation table.
Okay, with respect to my question, Governor, though, please explain to us the process of this recognition agreement, because we're talking about talks that were happening and you were close to it. But I think Kenyans want to understand what takes 2 years for a recognition agreement to be signed.
It shouldn't take 2 years, really, but those recognition agreements must be signed by each county. Because the county governments are, in a sense, independent on their own. So I think it may be basically be bureaucratic, but I would say that in the negotiations and discussions we had, even up to Mombasa 3 weeks ago, we had set a time frame under which all these agreements were going to be signed before even they called the strike.
But would you agree that that has been something that causes mistrust amongst the doctors?
It may well be. Yeah. It may well be, but we were on course.
All right. So let's talk about those salaries and the offer that you said you've put on the table, but the doctors have not come up to either give a counter offer or to give that negotiations. I'd just like us to put up some comparisons on our screen now that so upset doctors. So let's take a look at some of these salary requirements. So an MCA who I think it'll be after 2017, an MCA will be required to have a degree. An MCA takes home 157,000. A member of the county executive committee, these would be your cabinet secretaries if you like, takes home 182,000. Speaker of County Assembly of Kisii County as well takes home 283,500. So now let's take a look at the salaries for doctors. Look at that. Doctors entry level, 45,000. Nurses job group J, 24,000, and H, 19,000. And yet doctors have to go through 6 years of training and a degree. And part of that is what doctors are upset with. When you take a look at these comparisons, Governor, what are your thoughts? Doctors are upset. They have to go through 6 years of training. An MCA not required to even have a degree. Members of your own county assembly and Speaker of the county assembly earning way more than what doctors get at entry level. This is their grievance. with the county government. Would you like to respond?
Yes, I would want to respond to that, Fiona. I would want to tell you that when you do an analysis, you need to get all the facts. The analysis that you've done there is not correct, and it gives a wrong impression to Kenyans, and probably that is something that you need to pass to all the people that are involved in media. I will tell you, a doctor intern who comes in gets not less than 130,000. There is the salary, there is leave allowance, there is commuter allowance, there is extraneous allowance, there is emergency allowance. All those allowances, when you put them together, they are close to 130,000. And that is somebody who has just left university. For a medical officer who is working, he gets close to 180,000 shillings because his salary is slightly higher and the allowances are higher. So to just put the salary alone is to actually give wrong impression to Kenyans. So basically what we are saying is a medical intern is actually getting about 130,000 when you look at all those allowances, the house allowance, leave allowance, strenuous allowance, emergency allowance, non-practice allowance, all those allowances when you put them together. Then the medical officer himself gets those allowances, including the salary, and it comes to between 170 and 180,000. And that is what we were increasing. And we are not even finished increasing it because we have not even got to the CBA. Remember, we have not got to the CBA. What we are giving was an amount that was basically to get them back to work. And then we get to the CBA. We have not even talked about the job evaluation exercise itself because we have not seen what Sarah Serem has given because she has actually increased salaries of all cadres.
So let's talk about the talks with the nurses. Because that yielded some success this afternoon. However, we found one faction of the nurses not present. Do you think then the agreement that you signed will last, will hold? I know there's a National Governing Council tomorrow of the Union of Nurses that will ratify the agreement. But talk to us about the fact that the General Secretary was missing. Are you worried that this will not hold?
I would be worried if the General Secretary is actually Kenya National Union of Nurses, or if Kenya National Union of Nurses is actually the General Secretary. I do believe that they have an institutional framework, they have governing structures. The persons who signed that document, one was the chairman of the union, the boss of Seth. The next person who signed was the Deputy Secretary General of the Union. Those two signed on behalf of the union. I signed on behalf of county governments, and the Cabinet Secretary for Health signed on behalf of national government, because we have two levels of government.
Yes.
And so what I'm saying is this, that we have been in discussion with the negotiating team. That was a negotiating team that was set up by the governing council of the nurses union. It's not Seth Panyako who set them up. It was set up by the governing council of the nurses union. And we made agreement with them. And every day, whatever we were discussing, they would go back to Seth Panyako and he agrees. Up to yesterday, he had agreed that he would come this morning for the signing. So we ourselves from the government side, both county and national government, we did not understand what problems they have. If they have any problems, those are internal. But as far as we are concerned, we signed with the negotiating team that we were given by the governing council of the nurses union.
So you're confident it will hold?
We are confident that it will hold, and we are also completely confident that our nurses will go back to work. And I will tell you something. When you are dealing with a matter of health, it's a matter that is very, very fickle. It's a matter that you shouldn't play politics with. And it's a matter that you don't want to go the route that Seth has gone. He's a friend of mine. But on this one, I think he's lost it.
Okay, all right. Let's focus back on the doctors. And I'd like us to listen to what the Secretary General of the Doctors Union, Dr. Ouma Oluga, had to say about this issue. We spoke to him at the start of this strike that they have. Let's listen to his statements.
Been requesting for meetings, writing letters for meetings which go unanswered. For the last 3 years, particularly in the last 90 days, we've written several letters requesting for meetings, even when it should have been the prerogative of the government to request and organize for those meetings.
All right, it seems like everybody's sticking to their guns. So my question to you on this is, what compromise is the county government willing to get into together with the national government and the Treasury and all the stakeholders towards bringing the doctors to the table? Or are you also adamant that you have made the counter-offer and it's for the doctors, you know, to respond or perhaps not?
Vion, I have a county to run, but I've been sitting in Nairobi for the last 8 days. What that tells you is that I want to see this thing over. And you can't say that the government has refused when it hasn't been given a counter-offer. I think you'd be speculating, and I don't think it's good to speculate. What I would ask our brothers and sisters, and what I would want the other doctors to do for us, is to tell them to come back on the negotiation table. Because where you have a situation of blackmail, it becomes very difficult to operate. And yet we know that in negotiations, it takes two to tango. And that by the time that you are doing the tango, you must all be equal.
So you believe you've ceded enough ground in the negotiations so far?
We have not said about ceding because we have not even started the negotiations. We gave an offer. They have not given a counter offer. So you can't say where we were going to stop.
So what happens to Kenyans now? 6 days, you're saying you've given an offer. They're saying we're not coming to the table until the CBA is implemented. So where does that leave Kenyans now, 6 days and counting?
I do ask you and Kenyans of goodwill to talk to the doctors, to come back on the negotiation table. This is their country. What we were offering was not the totality. What we were offering was something to get them back to work, and that we were going to do a comprehensive collective bargaining agreement with them. If you remember, before devolution, there were only about 800 doctors in the counties. As we speak, in the counties, we now have 3,500 doctors. Before devolution, we had only 7,000 nurses. As we speak, we have over 25,000 nurses in the counties. What am I saying? I'm saying that since the county governments came in, we have been able to triple the number of doctors that are working in our facilities. We have been able not only to triple, but probably 4 times the number of nurses that are working in our facilities, and we're continuing. And we want to improve our facilities.
Okay.
We will not be doing that if we had any negative. And the other thing that I want to tell you, apart from the salaries that we are talking about, all the county governments, the Human Resources Committee of the Council of Governors advised all county governments to ensure that all the doctors are promoted. Indeed, they were even upgraded one job group. The entry level was job group L, we moved it to M. And we also advised all the doctors to be promoted, and they have all been promoted in all the counties.
So
if I knew of a
to
county that they have not been promoted, I would be very shocked.
So what you're saying tonight is the doctors need to come back to the negotiating table.
They just need to come back.
Okay.
You can't solve a crisis in a vacuum.
All right. On that, I think we want to conclude. But Governor, I would be remiss now that I have you here, if I didn't get your comment on our ongoing coverage here on KTN, which is 47 Days of Accountability, where we're taking a look at the Auditor General's reports for the financial year 2014-2015. And just to get your comments on some of the comments that have been put in that report, talking about for the year under review, only 4 out of 28 bank accounts were configured to IFMIS, also raising some issues with the bursary funds reallocation saying that about 30 million shillings from the bursary was diverted and recorded as having been spent on conferences, training, and advertisements. Would you like to respond to some of the queries that have been raised by the Auditor General on what's happening across the counties, but specifically within Kisii County?
Yes, I would. Audit queries are audit queries which we have answered with the Senate. We expect the Senate will give their report. I am also told actually that you are covering the same in all the counties, and I expect that your people will come to Kisii County.
Oh, we're coming tomorrow.
When they do, Vion, I'll be able to answer it.
Okay, would you like to?
In a logical manner,
yes,
but I would want
yes.
to say this, that is incumbent upon all of us to ensure proper accountability and to ensure proper ethical behavior in the way that we handle governance issues.
All right.
And some of those issues that you have raised, I'll be able to answer them when your team comes.
All right. Why would the queries be resolved with the Senate rather than with the Auditor General? Because we've heard a lot of complaints from county governors saying, but we responded to the Senate. But were these responses not given to the Auditor General's office?
The responses were given to the Auditor General's offices. But again, in the Senate, you are able to explain. Some of them would actually not be correct. And that's what most county governments have done.
But isn't it the duty and responsibility of county management to respond to the Auditor General as per the audit process?
Yes, it is the responsibility, and the county governments have actually done that. And it is a process, a constitutional process. Senate is a constitutional process.
So is the Auditor General's office.
Legal. The Auditor General raises issues which the counties need to answer.
Yes.
The Senate follows them up. And I think what the Senate is doing is the right thing.
All right, so when we come to your county and we start to ask about 30 million that was diverted from the bursary funds to conferences, training and advertisement.
I'll be able to answer that.
Would you please answer that now?
I can assure
Kenyans
you,
are watching and they'd like to hear your response.
I can assure you that there was no diversion. There's no diversion. The money that we have, like for instance, if you look at bursaries, they are administrative expenses. Because in every ward, you have the money like the money that we gave on bursaries in Kisii County. This particular year alone, Kisii County gave the highest bursary in Kenya of all the counties, 240 million shillings. I was giving 5 million for every ward. But what we did is we set up an institutional framework within every ward for them to choose to ensure the whole issue is completely transparent and accountable. So within the context of the institutional framework, there are people who sit to determine who should be given a bursary. And also, there are training programs that are given to those people. So if there were any resources that were used, and which is something I'm actually going to check, they were resources that were properly used.
All right. Is it your response then that the Auditor General's office was mistaken in saying that 30 million was spent on conferences, training and advertisements, contrary to required regulations to not move money from the development vote to the recurrent expenditure?
You know, you will have to even reduce the amount of money that you people charge. We pay quite a lot to the standard when we are advertising. That would be part of the problem, because when we pay you so much money, then you come back to us.
But is it supposed to come back? Is it supposed to come from the bursary fund?
The bursary fund itself as an administrative expense.
Okay.
Yeah, so you need to know that. So I told you when your people come, I'll be able to answer.
All right. So is it your statement here that Standard should reduce its prices,
yes,
and that
please,
is why?
Please do so. We'll be so happy because we spend so much money on you.
Okay, but that is within your budget. You can choose not to advertise with the Standard if you think the prices are too high.
You'll kill us if we don't advertise with you, so we'll continue advertising.
All right, Governor James Ongwae, who's the governor of Kisii County, and the chair of the Human Resources Committee, that is the Labor and Social Security Human Resources Committee within the Council of Governors. We hope to see some resolution with the stalemate with the doctors. Those are his views. What are yours? Please send us your comments. Continue to do that. The hashtag is CheckPoint. We'll be right back.